introduce myself. My name's Jude Heaton, and little sign, and then was very interested in the Islamic world and in this part of the world particularly, so tried to find a job out here, and was lucky enough to get a job with the Friday Times newspaper, which some of you may or may not know. And so I worked there for 2 years, mostly as a features editor. I wrote about 150 articles or so for the Friday Times and various other newspapers. I then went back to England and worked in politics in a range of roles, particularly on the general election campaign, British general election campaign, and then got enticed back to Pakistan by Qasim Saab to work in his office. I coordinated the last of these conferences back in 2005. Please come in. I coordinated the last of these conferences back in 2005, and then was a project manager for TNS. And then once that was set up, I moved back to England, now with a Pakistani wife, and joined the civil service, the Accelerated Leadership Fast Track Programme for the government, and I now work as a policymaker and do various other bits and pieces. So I've got a range of experience in education, journalism, politics, these sorts of things. So that's who I am. The talk today, what I'm going to be mainly talking about, the title is Learning for All, Building the Learning Community, but what I really want to look at is the idea of how people are different, how all of us are different, and we like to learn in different ways, and how all the children who we come across in the classroom are different. That's kind of the key idea I want to explore, and the structure will be, I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes or so. I've then got a questionnaire for everyone to fill out, which I think is quite a fun and interesting one, which basically helps you identify your own learning style. So that's a practical, hopefully quite fun for everyone to do, and that you'll do on your own. Then once everyone's had a chance to fill that out, I'd say about 20 minutes it should take, then we'll have a few discussions, and I'll get all you in your tables to have discussions about some of the ideas, and then we can feed those back to the group. So a bit of me talking, a bit of an exercise, and a bit of group work. So please. We're just starting. So that's the overall structure of the day, the session. As I said, the purpose of the session is really to help us understand the importance of different personalities and learning styles of students, and to help staff and help all of you as teachers become more aware of your own learning styles and how that might affect how you can be the best teachers you can and connect to as many children as you can who come through your classrooms. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the traditional approach to schooling, which was mentioned a little bit in the opening sessions today. The traditional approach to schooling is really has a... Please come in if you're... Just ask them. The traditional approach to schooling really has a one-size-fits-all approach. And by the traditional approach, I'm really meaning the style of education that came in, really in Victorian England was really the place where it really began, and then got exported to the rest of the world, and was very useful for during the Industrial Revolution to have a basic level of education for all children. And really it stayed the status quo for the best part of, I would say, 150 years. And I think this model of schooling is still very dominant in a number of ways, but I think Beaconhouse is really leading the way in Pakistan in terms of trying to question this model and move forward and have a style of education that is more student-led, I think is more enriching for both students and teachers, hopefully as well. But I think there's always more that can be done. I mean, in the traditional approach to schooling, I suppose one of the key models is that children come into a classroom, usually in rows, not in groups, and are told basically, be quiet, sit down, and listen to me. That's the basic style. It's you might have been talking outside, now all shut up and listen to me. And so, particularly with younger children, this is very difficult. I'm sure many of you have experienced. If you've got young, energetic children, and you're told to sit down, then they can be a little bit restless, and you're not really connecting with them. After being spoken at for a certain length of time, the children would then be given an exercise to do, basically repeating what they've been told, and that would then ultimately lead to the exam where they repeat once again what's been told to them. So it's based on repetition, it's based on passivity, so the children are very passive recipients, and I think these aspects of it also mean that it's a one-size-fits-all. That's what I mean, is that it's not tailored to each. I don't say, how can I engage with you, what learning styles do you have, and what about you? It's, this is my set bunch of knowledge, and now, here you go onto you. So it's a very monotonous style, I would say. I think also for the teachers, because the teacher then has to repeat the same thing year after year, rather than being trusted to really connect with the children. So for some children, this system works fine. For some children, those who are good at listening, those who like sitting still, those who are good at memory and good at repeating, can be very successful in this system. They can be very successful. At least if you count success as passing exams. You could have a long discussion as whether that actually means successful education. But there are two main problems that I want to highlight with the system. The first is what I've just mentioned about repetition. It's not about helping children to really understand, it's about getting them to repeat a fact in a set format. It doesn't really matter how much you understand, as long as you can repeat the right stock phrase in the exam. I remember one of my favourite examples from when I was at school was my French exam. My French exam, I went to a good school and they told me the way to pass a French exam is to remember 10 phrases. Just remember 10 phrases. If you remember those 10 phrases and repeat them in the exam, then you'll get an A. Sure enough, I remembered 10 phrases, I repeated them, I got an A, all very good. Do I speak a word of French? No. I don't speak any at all. So there's the problem of repetition. And the second problem, which is really what I want us to focus on in this session, is that it doesn't work for all children. Yes, there are some children it works for, but many children just simply can't engage with the style. They just get switched off and drift away from the academic system. And usually those are children who will be the most disruptive, the ones who will be labelled failures by the system. Yes, so as I say, that's the real area I wanted to focus on today. Before I go any further, are there any questions about what I've said so far? Does that all make some sense, what I'm saying so far? Yes?
Basically, it's a teacher-centered approach.
It's a teacher-centered approach. Yeah, I would say it's not even quite teacher-centered. Something that was genuinely teacher-centered would have more trust in the teacher. But actually what we're talking about here is a system where the teacher is not trusted. You're effectively turned into a machine. You're said, here is the curriculum, dispense it. I mean, frankly, if you could have a robot, you could almost do the same thing with that approach.
Isn't it teacher-imposed?
Teacher-imposed, yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, exactly, a teacher-imposed system. So what I want to look at now is some of the reasons why children can't engage with this system, and to go on to explore some ways that we can address these problems. So as I say, some children can engage with these teaching styles, but others can't. The simple explanation is that, I know some people like to fall back and say, well, maybe these children are just stupid, they're not so intelligent, they're not academic. We find ways to label these children, say it's their fault. It's not my fault as a teacher, it's not my fault as somebody who writes a curriculum, it's the child's fault. To me, that's a fairly lazy explanation. It's a bit of a cop-out. I think all children, everybody who's a parent, everybody who's engaged with children, that know every child has something in it. And as teachers, we have to try and bring that out. If we're failing to bring it out, then we're failing those children. So I think we have to see it not as a failure of the child, but a failure of the system. One reason why I think this system fails some children is a very simple point. It sounds very simple, but I think it's deceptively simple. Namely, people are different. Every one of us is different. We all learn in different ways. If everybody learns in a different way, how is one set system going to work for everyone? I don't think it will. So I think in order to look at how we can have a better style of teaching, we need to start understanding the differences of people. Now, we all know that people are different. All of us, we have our families, our friends. We know intuitively that people are different. This is no great insight there. But actually, thinking clearly about how people are different is very, very difficult. It's always been difficult. For thousands of years, people have struggled to find ways to understand, why does this person get easily angry? Why does this person stay very calm? Why is that? Is it genetic? Is it upbringing? We still don't know. We don't know. It's very difficult to find ways to describe differences in personalities. I think one problem is that as soon as we start talking about difference, we start talking about, well, which is better and which is worse. And I don't think that's very helpful when you're talking about differences. I mean, for example, let's take an engineer and an abstract physicist, someone like Jude Latham. These two people, which is better, an engineer or an abstract physicist? Well, it depends on the situation. I mean, if my car's just broken down, then Jude Latham, him telling me, well, this is how an engine works, and this is the abstract nuclear physics, I'll go, well, that's very interesting, but I need to get home, and can you please fix my car? Equally, if I'm at a nuclear physics convention, then the engineer won't be very helpful. Please, come in. Don't worry. No problem, no problem. So first of all, I think we need to stop trying to instantly label things better or worse, and just say, well, it depends. It depends on what you want, it depends on the individual, and have a little bit more flexibility. Another problem is that when we start thinking about other people, we naturally start by thinking about ourselves. I understand myself quite well, and so I think, well, are you the same as me? And I kind of assume somehow that other people are the same as me. And I think we all unconsciously really do this. We assume that other people want the same things as us and approach the world in the same way as us. And in a way, it's inevitable. We have to start with ourselves, but that can be limiting as well. I mean, I know from my own experience, please. My brother and I are extremely different people. We're complete opposite people. You know, my brother, when we were at school, my brother would sit down with one problem. He would sit, he would focus. He was like a rock. You know, he would sit there and he would go through it line by line by line, very systematic, very quiet, and he'd block out the whole world around him. He would just be focused on what's in front of him. Whereas I would be always, you know, what do you say? What are you saying? Engage with everything around me. I was a much more sort of social person, if you like. Now, which of those is better? I would say neither of them is better. You know, my brother now is at Oxford studying mathematics and biology, and he's, you know, doing very well for himself, studying very difficult problems, and his work, that methodical style works very well for him. For me, my ability to attune to people meant that I could come to Pakistan, a country that I didn't know at all, and to some extent, I hope, adapt and make myself at home. As a journalist, it was very useful to me. I had to engage with very, very different sorts of people. When I worked in Qasim Saab's office, I had to adapt to Qasim style. I had to work out, well, how can I work with you? Somebody who's like a rock can't do that very well. But somebody like me finds that quite easy. So what I'm getting at is all of these different styles, and you see them very early in children. Even, you know, my little nephew, who's a few months old, and already you can get a feel of the type of energy that he has, if you like. And I think as teachers, we all need to sort of try and build this more into our learning styles. As I say, cultures have for thousands of years tried to find ways to understand differences between people. I think the first system that I'm aware of was the ancient Babylonians and their system of astrology. I'm not sure. Astrology something that some of you have come across before? You know, as I say, okay, good. So I mean, this is one of the first languages of talking about difference. You know, you talk about somebody being fiery, or somebody being very earthy, or somebody being watery, and we use this language in, you know, we're talking with our friends. We use this language, and I think we need to bring some of these insights into the classroom. I mean, just to oversimplify a little bit about astrology, you might say that, you know, a fiery Aries, they want